Yeah. So now it says the meeting is being recorded live streaming in Facebook. Yeah.
Okay.
So now we are open to the world.
For the moment, I don't have any videos I can cross-post on our account, Dragos.
Let me see why.
I can see the same screen we are watching, yes?
Yes.
Let me see. I'm going to refresh and see if it changes something.
Dan, you look very institutional with the...
he didn't like it, Elena. You're muted, Dan. We cannot hear you.
Cannot.
Okay, I said I can change the background if you wish. If you don't like something, like
looks perfect.
I can wear a mask if you want. I can do anything you want.
It looks perfect.
No, this is my office because sometimes because COVID, I don't go to televisions, but I have some public interventions from here, so it's much easier for me to work from here sometimes.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, that's.
No, it's a good environment for
actually
the
have a roll up here.
Thank you. You are very kind.
If you want to go on, please do. I will just make sure that I republish. I'm having some connection problems on Facebook, so if you need to start, no problem. I'll just follow up.
So Luis, we start switching off our...
Yes, if all participants could already switch off their videos and microphones, please. There we go.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello. Good to see you.
Thanks a lot for joining us. We are letting people come into the room, into the virtual room. So I suggest we start in a couple of minutes.
Very good. Absolutely fine.
We have asked participants to switch off their cameras and micros.
Okay. I'll do that myself while we're waiting, maybe, or do you want to?
I think probably you stay in because I will just say a couple of words and give you the floor very, very fast.
Excellent. I wait for your green light.
That's it. We are more or less ready, but one of the few good things of online events is that they tend to start much more on time than regular ones. So
I know, yes. Yeah, I've noticed.
we are all discovering a new sense of punctuality.
It's true.
Hi, Susanne. We have asked participants to switch off their camera so that we can maximize the broadband for everyone. Thank you. So, welcome, everyone. We are starting the event. First things first, we are transmitting from a Zoom event, and the event is being live streamed in Facebook. So that means the entire lecture and following debate is going to be recorded and available in Facebook afterwards. So we'll also be recording the meeting here in Zoom for our usage. We are very grateful to have Pia Ahrenkilde Hansen as a guest speaker today. Pia sits at the meeting point of EU communications and policy, and because our network is about matching politics and policy, I think we could not have a better speaker to address the topic of communicating Europe, Corona, recovery, and beyond. Pia Ahrenkilde Hansen has been Director General for Communication in the Commission since March 2019. So she has been overseeing all the communication around the Commission's response to the coronavirus crisis. So I think this is going to be an extremely topical moment to look back at what has been going on in the Commission and the European Union in general with this crisis. Previously, she has been Deputy Secretary General of the European Commission and Chief Spokesperson at the Commission as well. And she holds a Master of Science in International Business Administration and Modern Languages from the Copenhagen Business School, with a dissertation on European identities. I think this is also a topic many of us are interested on. So before I give the floor to Pia, just how we are going to proceed, Pia will address us on the subject of the lecture. Then we have a panel or a group of colleagues from the network. For colleagues from the network will raise questions to the Director General, and then we will have debate with participants. Some of you have sent questions in advance, so I will give the persons who sent questions in advance the chance to read their questions to Pia, and then we will, if we still have time before 6, I will do a summary of the discussions in the chat. So do use the chat if you want to raise any question or if there is any point you would like to bring up, and then we'll do a sort of summary of these at the end, so that everyone has a chance to link up. And also, in order to maximize broadband for everyone, if I could ask all participants to please switch off their cameras, and of course, when we give you the floor for a question, you can switch it back. So without further ado, thanks a lot, Director General Pia Ahrenkilde Hansen, for being with us today. The floor is yours.
Well, many thanks, dear Professor Busa Garcia. I'm absolutely delighted to be with you and everyone who has joined the event today. Thank you so much for the kind introduction and for having me with you today. Networks such as yours are incredibly important when it comes to connecting crucially EU policies with politics at a national level and also at a trans-European level, I should add. It's absolutely vital input also that you can provide us here in the European institutions with regard to knowledge and understanding. And of course, these debates and debates such as the ones that we will be having today, the OpenEUDebate, are also essential for connecting the European political leadership with good analysis and research. That's increasingly vital these days, as indeed, as we are busy responding to to a major crisis, we do definitely not always have the opportunity that we also would need while responding to slow down and reflect. It's not the first time that we have the opportunity and pleasure to take a moment to reflect together. Earlier this year, in fact, right in the middle, in the heat of the immediate crisis, students and scholars from the ULB came together to brainstorm on crisis communication, and colleagues of mine were engaged in that, and we presented what we were doing, and we got really precious feedback, I felt, because it was reported back to me from in great detail. I was very interested, so thank you very much also for the good reflections that were produced on that occasion. Many of the things that are important in a crisis when it comes to communication were also addressed initially there. Timing of the crisis response, the communication response, the roles and expectations in a crisis, how we actually have agile and effective systems in place to produce the adequate communication, and also of course symbols and tradition have a role to play there. There were recommendations made on both strategy and tactics for crisis communication on that occasion, and we have really also reflected and will continue to build on those interesting first recommendations. So my thanks go also to those who participated then, and to you who are participating now. I look really much forward to having another excellent conversation this afternoon. And I will focus on three things. I will first give an overview of the Commission's communication response to the coronavirus crisis. Then I'll try to dive a little bit deeper into what's next on the horizon in terms of communicating in this exceptional phase that we have before us, and what plans we have. And then I will reflect a little bit on what changes and trends mean for our communication more broadly. And afterwards, I look forward to hearing, of course, crucially, your questions and views, and hopefully lively debate. I'll first then give an overview of how we responded at first to the coronavirus crisis in our communication in the European Commission. You will not be surprised if I said that it was a big job for a rather small army of communicators to actually, in this situation where all of a sudden we found ourselves very quickly in a mainly virtual environment, we had to actually still be able to connect with Europe's 440 million people in 24 languages. So let me go through maybe quickly the three-phased approach. Phase one, as I was saying, was about reacting to the crisis, both in terms of communication and institutionally. So first, we were really in full crisis management and communication mode. And some defining elements were, you could say, establishing a centralized and unified messaging that still very much continues as we speak. But of course, in the very early days of the crisis, it was extremely important that every part of the organization was aligned to the impulse that was being given by our president, who put together, as you will remember, at the very early stage, a crisis response team of commissioners, a coronavirus crisis response team of commissioners, and organized also very much the political communication flowing from that crisis team that was operational at the first moment on the president's initiative, and literally here in the building happening and being orchestrated in the 13th floor of the Berlaymont building, because again the president could no longer move around Europe and travel as indeed she was previously, of course, also doing when she was engaging with leaders and communities across Europe. So establishing that unified communication that then flew and trickled down to the day-to-day service that orchestrates our public political communication to media, our spokesperson service, and then, of course, fully mobilizing other parts of the House that have their part to play. In addition to, of course, continuing to be led by the communication of the president, the members of the college of the commission, who also very actively engaged in the forms of communication that were possible, in addition to the spokesperson service that I mentioned, and our offices, our representations in member states and beyond, just to mention some of the key communication actors that were mobilized there, as we were really very busy to align and centralize the communication, to unify it, and also ensure that it could be speedy enough, because that's of course the other part of the crisis communication requirements. You have to get out there fast to respond. But that was not all. We very quickly experienced that to be able to also bring everybody in the services on the same page, it was useful to create also a broader forum of communication coordination. So we set up a task force to respond indeed, and to align and coordinate our broader communication to citizens in a task force. So structure and leadership on corporate communication was also to support and indeed mirror what was going on at the political level, very important. We set up a virtual press room for journalists, and of course we critically also here, as normally in communication, realize that communication here is as much a listening as a speaking exercise. So also our political reporters on the ground in our representations were extremely vital in actually informing the communication and the messaging that we put out. Our president was very keen to put everybody on the same page with regard to the policy response that the Commission was initiating, when at first, of course, it was very much concentrating on coordinating the actions of member states. You will also, I'm sure, tell me that it didn't look very coordinated at first, and it took quite some effort and realization, of course, before member states realized that we could only really beat this virus or start fighting it effectively by working together. But this was very much a coordination effort, and to mirror the response. Also digitally, our president was very keen to set up a central hub for our messaging and our policy initiatives. So we set up a website where we basically, of course, promoted as much as we could traffic towards the website, driven by our social media activities, leading to, I think we're around a bit under 5 million page views since the creation of the website early March. And just to give you sort of some figures, 20,000 social media posts were involved through the crisis, and 30 million video views, because you will have seen, I'm sure, many of the videos that our president put on social media. That was a privileged form of communication for her, to every time a new action was taken, to communicate via a video that was then put out via our social media accounts, and there, of course, adapted also by our representations in different languages. And we also had, of course, our open channel of communication with citizens, responding directly to their questions as well. So I think what was important there was also that we used social media a lot, because it's a visual environment, and in a crisis, visuals are particularly important. I will come back to that in a moment. So we focused very much on visual and video communication. People get very visceral, need tangible, let's say, action to be shown, and that was very much driving our efforts in that respect. So we shared images along our messaging areas. So it was about, in the early phases of the crisis, showing things like repatriating or supporting the repatriations of citizens who had got stranded due to lockdowns, and indeed some, very big reductions in the airline traffic. It was about showing supplies being brought to the right destinations. It was about showing that the EU was involved very directly in this solidarity action to get equipment to where it was needed. And indeed, maybe I think it's fair to say that one of the most striking turning points in the crisis was when we began to see images of Romanian doctors arriving in Italy, because until that point it was actually hard. We saw it very much also in the state of public opinion in places like Italy, so dramatically hit by the pandemic. It was very hard until then to visualize the solidarity that was actually starting to happen. But this made it easier. It was a kind of turning point that was then followed by other communication, of course, important media communication as well by our president. But really, these visuals and also the ability of our representation in Italy also to show very visually what was happening was really key. So acting concretely in the health crisis and making it tangible, that was really important. It was, by the way, also the case when we were able to show images that then started also turning up on national television of green lanes to keep Europe open for the circulation of vital goods. This was the kind of thing that made it more real to people that the EU was actually responding in the crisis, even if, of course, this happened in parallel with things which were less obvious for people to relate to, namely the coordination, the alleviation of the economic impact that was starting, of course, to be felt in member states through this temporary state aid framework, the wavering of the or the triggering of the escape clause that enabled indeed also the financial means to be increased drastically in member states to respond directly to the immediate impacts of the crisis. But that was less easy to visualize. So therefore, all the other actions were very important. So to show, the masks, the protective equipment, the ventilators, which were being indeed also sent from member states to other member states who needed it, and indeed also with EU support, joint public procurement actions, etc. So one thing that really also, I think, illustrated the importance of acting concretely and in the health crisis was the global response. The fundraising marathon that was hosted by our president kicked off in early May, where we saw leaders plug in from around the world to commit funding to fill research funding gaps and to bring countries together to fight the coronavirus, and to show also a commitment to multilateralism. It was about indeed mobilizing funding for the vaccines, of course, first and foremost, for testing and for diagnostics. And it enabled us to team up with civil society like Global Citizen, with international organizations, and celebrities like Hugh Jackman and Miley Cyrus. I hope that some of you were able to follow it. It showed two things, in my view. namely the communication potential of major events and cooperation with high-profile figures in such situations to reach out broader on a concrete and very mobilizing project. And then second, of course, what is really possible when communication mutually reinforces policy when they act as two sides of the same coin. I'm just asking my colleague here to come and help me on the screen here, because I think I don't see much of what's going on at your end. And it would be very nice to see you. So I'm just getting, and
we can
there's a code that just needs to be introduced,
okay.
Because it has shut down because it's another computer than the one I'm using normally. That's why. Otherwise, I would do it myself. But I can't see what you're seeing now. It's much better. Thank you very much. And probably I'll ask Tom to come and sit here, because if it happens again, then he can.
We hear you very well. So.
Because I don't know the code to his computer.
No problem.
Okay, I continue. So basically, that was the global response. So the importance of tangible, concrete action, visibility. So building on that, we have moved into what one could call phase 2, a phase where it's about reclaiming momentum and lead on the narrative. And when I say that, I mean getting a coherent narrative across about what we are doing to face the crisis and indeed bring solutions and prepare the ground. Even if we are still not in the recovery phase, we are certainly very much preparing the ground for it after having taken some immediate action. First, the immediate crisis response, the immediate economic response, and now being in a phase where we are preparing the recovery. So there again, the very fully consistent messaging across the institution and beyond, I would say, all the actors that have a role in this is extremely important, and also to be as proactive as possible in the communication when it comes to showing the role that the European Union has, and that indeed we are leading as the Commission in charge of taking many of the initiatives in the policy areas, from coordinating the exit strategy, reopening the tourism sector with support, of course, involved also there, and preparing, as I was saying, the recovery. And in this phase, we are also now looking at not only the political communication, which of course is important when every time a new initiative is taken and continues to be the case, but we also need to look broader and see how can we actually get across to citizens and basically, of course, we have to look at very much how public opinion there is affected, and there we are preparing we call it at the moment the recovery campaign. That's a working title, where we are focusing on the full European Union, but we will have special focus on 7 countries that have been in public sentiment and opinion terms particularly affected when it comes to the perception of European Union action. We're talking Italy, we're talking Spain, France, Belgium, Austria, Czechia, and Greece. And again, this is the starting point. The choices that are made were based on data and research on public opinion about the EU response in these countries, and relate to things like decrease in trust in the European Union, and also perceptions about the European Union action, even if we also see in the sentiment analysis that is emerging, and which at the moment is only partial, because also, for example, our Eurobarometers have been affected by the crisis. We haven't been able to do the interviews that we normally do, or that rather the because it's not us, it's a completely independent operation carrying out the interviews. But these interviews have not been carried out, of course, in the usual normal way. So we are basing ourselves on more partial analysis for the moment that will soon be completed by a more comprehensive EU 27 analysis on with Eurobarometer as one of the very important instruments that we can use for that. So we will seek to design a communication campaign, communication actions, where we will base ourselves once indeed we have political agreement about the recovery plan for Europe. We will try to roll out a recovery campaign where we will address indeed this perception about insufficient EU presence in the crisis, which again has evolved considerably over the crisis period and is changing all the time, of course, from the beginning, when indeed we were not able to yet show so much as tell the story. So it's better when you can show it than only tell it. Now it's more about preparing how we will actually communicate the recovery efforts and indeed the recovery plan for Europe in a way that makes it clear what it means to people. So seeing it from people's perspective, seeing it from the perspective of impacts from impact and benefits for citizens. So this is something that will be kind of an umbrella campaign that very much will precede, but then be followed, but not replaced by already planned campaigns on the Green Deal and also digitalization. You know, the twin transitions, which were and remain top priorities in our recovery planning, but of course reviewed in light of indeed the needs for recovery, in addition to, of course, building a more resilient Europe. So we will apply all the lessons that I've talked a bit about already from our communication during the coronavirus crisis, the health crisis, because of course, which is far from over, as we know. And then that will then enable us to fully go into the recovery phase, which of course will last for a long time, for several years, once we have the instruments at European level, because of course this is complementing what is also being done and continuing to be done at national level through hopefully the ambitious multi-annual financial framework and recovery instrument proposals, the next generation EU instrument agreed by the EU institutions, starting with the very soon to be upcoming European Council that has, by the way, also been just mentioned in our President's speech in the European Parliament when the presentation of the German presidency priorities took place with the German Chancellor. So if I now go from the three phases in the recovery campaign and the recovery campaign, but maybe I just, before I do that, let me just say a few more words about the recovery campaign, because of course it's important to add that this campaign will have as its target audience adults. It's a quite broad target audience because it's all who have been affected by the economic impact between 25 and 60. And we will seek to reassure citizens that the economic recovery and the transition to a sustainable and climate neutral economy go hand in hand, and that this twin transition will create opportunities for their families and communities, as well as new and better jobs, and that indeed the green transition will benefit both health, environment, our financial and economic situation. And the campaigns will also aim to convince citizens to change their behavior and make more sustainable choices. Because when fighting climate change, we need a group effort. So let me just see, because I think I just need to get back to some of the notes that I had here before I get completely distracted in my thoughts. Let me talk about the recovery plan itself a little bit, because I think it's important to go back to what it really underpins our communication here with Next Generation EU, which is, of course, as I was saying, an instrument that is embedded within the EU budget. To give you a quick snapshot, it's supporting member states to recover, repair, and emerge stronger from the crisis, with public investment having a vital role to play in a balanced and sustainable recovery, and also the bulk of the funding from Next Generation EU, with more than 80% being used to support public investment. And it also supports key structural reforms in member states, concentrated where the crisis impact and the resilience needs are greatest. So that's the first point, supporting the member states themselves on the recovery. Then it's about kickstarting also the economy and mobilizing private investment, where urgent action is needed to kickstart the economy and create the conditions for a recovery. And much of this will be led by private investment in key sectors and technologies. And this investment is particularly crucial to the success of Europe's Green Deal and transitions, and digital transitions. And we expect that investment needs amount to at least 1.5 trillion just in 2020 to 2021. And investment in key sectors and technologies, from 5G to artificial intelligence and from clean hydrogen, which was just the subject of a package we issued today. Perhaps some of you heard our Executive Vice President Timmermans and Commissioner Simpson present this package, which is also about offshore renewable energy and a green energy strategy hold the key to Europe's future. It's about also, let's say, I'm just going to try to get my notes a little bit differently here, because I think I have mixed a few things up here. I've talked about, if you just excuse me 1 second, I'll just,
of course,
just 1 second. So sorry about that. I just showed you, you should never print. You should continue to work on digital. Apologies for this.
No
I just
worries.
wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anything. I hope you're still with me.
We are.
So I worked around a bit. I mean, what got me confused there was I mixed up actually I switched around. I first wanted to tell you about the policy side and then the campaign, and actually I started talking to you about the campaign and then the policy. But okay, now you know what the order should have been. That was kind of what made me slightly off track. But now I'm back on track. I think we can get to the conclusion quite quickly, and then I'll be happy to answer your questions. But I just want to make sure that I got my points across about the campaigns. I mean, of course, what underpins what we're doing right now is the whole structure and logic of our recovery plan proposals, with indeed the MFF proposal and the instrument Next Generation EU that enables us to really boost investment in green and digital transitions and resilience through channeling it through the multi-annual financial framework. That needs to be accompanied by a strong citizens-focused communication campaign so that people will be able to perceive the recovery and indeed the impacts also on their own situations of the recovery clearly and more clearly, of course, than naturally it has maybe been possible to perceive some of the European Union action in the immediate health crisis, because there, of course, first priority, of course, is the immediate health response, which very much took place at national level, with the European Union action complementing the national action. So this is really the logic. But this doesn't take away the need also to have strong campaigns on the Green Deal, indeed, which was in focus in our initiatives today here in the Commission, with some energy initiatives and a focus on hydrogen. And then the digital campaign, which will also accompany the digital transformation that we have indeed also very much as part of our political priorities which will remain extremely present in the recovery perspective. So if I come to the conclusion that I would like to draw for the trends in communication, I would like to share a few lessons that we will be carrying forward in these efforts. Some of the trends that might have been being accelerated by the coronavirus crisis. After the rejection, one could call it, of experts, there was a real opposition to expertise in communication in the late 20s and the 2010s. They are coming back in fashion. For example, also very much, let's say, illustrated by the fact that we have also, even in our leadership as president, we have a medical doctor, which of course has been an incredibly lucky coincidence, and perhaps it's not such a coincidence. Our president von der Leyen, and this new confidence and trust in expertise is really something that I think we will carry with us after the crisis. Then there's the obvious thing that we're doing right now, instead of me standing, and that would have been much nicer, I have to say, but the fact that we can connect across countries makes it, of course, extremely rewarding also to be working remotely. It's something we will be doing much more, undoubtedly, and also having conferences such as the one we're having now. So the importance of online communication will undoubtedly only grow. And then we will have deeper institutional cooperation in EU communication. And we have worked closely with Parliament, Council, and others, and the benefits communicating under one EU brand is obvious. And then during and following traumatic events, such as, of course, the coronavirus crisis, where we have tragically lost so many lives, have made it even more important to be empathetic in our communication, and to connect with people should therefore be really even more central than it has already been, and that we have tried to indeed work with in our corporate communication for a while. It will become even more central. Europeans also increasingly see pressure. We see it from the surveys coming from international tensions and threats. The good side of that is that it can be a trigger for broader conversations about EU benefits, and we also see it in the surveys. There's a demand for more assertiveness and autonomy of the European Union. And it could be a trigger also for more citizens' engagement, including through the conference on the future of Europe. In this crisis, humanity has been collectively bent to nature, and as such, green and climate change as topics will only grow in importance. And the EU is using its voice as a global leader, not only using our economic clout, but also using our voice and our values to bring people together, like indeed was the case in the Global Response Initiative and with regard to vaccines that I mentioned. And then, of course, we at the same time as communicating even more in a global perspective, we also need to go much more local and connect people to issues. And we should also be aware of new threats to nationalize the recovery efforts, indeed, and not give the credit that is due to the European Union. So there we need to work very creatively also in terms of how we get our messages across. We need to be attentive to the usual scapegoating that is not new to this crisis. EU scapegoating has always been the favorite sport of some, but we need to factor it in. And then crucially, and I'm sure we will discuss it in the debate also, there's disinformation as a factor that has been important also in this crisis, sometimes indeed even vitally dangerous, because as you will all have seen examples of wrong information about how this virus could be treated, wrong information about vaccination has been circulating at high speed sometimes. So there also we have very much tried to step up our action. I hope we will discuss this and many of the other issues as we go into the debate, and I look forward to this, and we'll be able to also pick up a couple of the points that I might have missed out in the discussion. So thank you very much for listening to me. I now look forward to listening to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think this connects directly to the things that we are discussing as a network and the things that we want to do. And indeed, we do have a few things. Probably most of the questions will look into the what's next, but that's up to the speakers. So without further ado, and we have until 6. I will give the floor to my colleagues in the network to raise different questions. Now, there is one thing I realized we didn't discuss. Should we proceed question by question, or would you prefer that we rather collect a few of them?
As you wish. I mean, depending on how broad they are, the questions, I can take them. Maybe it's more interesting question by question, because then we can have more dynamic discussion.
I agree. So without further ado, I will give the floor to my colleague, Professor García-Guitián, who is the coordinator of this Jean Monnet network. Elena, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you for sharing your time and this space, this digital space this afternoon, to just share your concerns and interests that, of course, are really important for us. As I know that there are a lot of questions, I just want to ask you if you can tell us a little bit more about the near future. You have a focus on what you have done and the things, the fast answer to the situation, But we are also very worried about a debate that is it has already started, that is not just on how specific policies we are developing, concrete decisions, but also on thinking about the future of the European Union. And the future of the European Union now has a different meaning after the crisis. It's going to be very, very important. And we need to open the debate not just on discussing the budget or the money, which is very important, by the way, but is going to be focused also on how we decide, who is going to decide about procedures. You were speaking about the role of experts, which is important, but it also has to do with the balances between institutions at the different levels. So my question is, if you are already thinking on the role of communication of your direction, on how we are going to be able to a little bit connect and communicate these processes that are going to start in some places. For example, in Spain, they are already planning a citizen assembly for the climate change, etc. So in which way we are going to be able to really use communication to make a coordination and to amplify the effect of a specific participatory mechanism that they are going to be split at different levels and in a kind of also messy way, as we see, following the documents that they are already producing, and how you think from communication you can help to maximize the diffusion to reach different, not just targets, but different types of citizens with different interests and different implications. This is an anticipation of the near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elena. So we'll proceed question by.
Absolutely, yes, with pleasure. Thank you very much for the very valid question about how indeed we engage with citizens, because I understand your question to be about citizens' engagement. I'm happy to say that we don't start from scratch on this, even if indeed, of course, the project, for example, of the conference on the future of Europe, which was intended to be kicked off in this spring. At least that was a little bit the perspective that was on the horizon. You will remember that this was part of President von der Leyen's political guidelines, and very much something that she put our Vice President Dubravka Šuica in charge of, indeed, alongside other colleagues in the college. An interinstitutional project, a project where talks were underway between the institutions on that should lead to indeed the agreement on a joint declaration. This is an agreement that is still not in place, of course, because all the institutions have been mobilized on the crisis, understandably, and this has been the focus of the crisis, but it has not meant and that citizens have been forgotten. And fortunately, even a lot of citizens' engagement, even through virtual means, has also been possible during the crisis, although, of course, it has been more challenging. But I said we were not starting from scratch, and I think it's important to remember that even when it comes to the political priorities that we have before us today, that we had in the political priorities for the European Union, those that were anchored in President von der Leyen's political guidelines, even when it comes to those priorities, they were very broadly also informed by previous citizens' engagement that had taken place both at national and European level. The Conference on the Future of Europe is and was designed to take, I think, this citizens' engagement a step further, and of course also to address some of the issues that you were hinting to in your question. Indeed, I think we will need to be innovative when it comes to, not least in light of the crisis, be innovative in the way that we enable this European conversation that hopefully the conference of the future of Europe will also become, to, for example, take place on the basis of new digital means. We are, while we are waiting for indeed the political frame of the conference to be clarified, once indeed the moment is right. Our president has just referred to the conference in her intervention in the parliament. We will have hopefully a digital platform also made available to citizens as one means for a broad citizens engagement to take place. It will certainly not be sufficient. I think there's a strong sense among politicians that a physical dimension of this is also very important. Again, we will have to see what the interinstitutional talks will bring in terms of the frame for the conference, but I think there's no doubt, and the Commission has said it often, that this needs to be go wider and deeper in the citizens' engagement than what we have seen before, so that we reach citizens also who normally have maybe not such a strong voice when it comes to European affairs. So widely and deeply in our European Union, in all corners of Europe, as our Vice President has put it, we need to be able to give citizens the possibility to voice their concerns through the means of this conference. This conference being, of course, one, but not the only means for citizens to engage between, let's say, the democratic moments that are, for example, the European elections in our European democracy, but also through many other means. And then in addition, of course, we have many other instruments, the possibility for citizens for example, to take citizens' initiatives. We have the possibility for citizens and civil society to voice their opinions on concrete policy initiatives that are taken through our now revamped consultation mechanisms. We have a tool that is called Have Your Say, just to mention that as an example. So there are many different channels in addition to these regular moments of engagement with both, politicians from the Commission through the citizens' dialogues, and of course the other institutions, citizens' engagement, and of course citizens also have their own elected members of the European Parliament as direct representatives to represent their interests. So, I mean, there are many channels for citizens to engage also very directly, and we look forward, where I sit, also to contribute to designing, let's say, new instruments to help that dialogue to prosper.
Thank you very much. The Conference of the Future of Europe is something most of us are looking forward, and I think we know also how important these engagement mechanisms have been for EU communication in the last decade. We will continue with a question also on the research we are carrying out. I'm giving now the floor to another colleague here in Madrid. That's Taru Habala, Marie Curie Fellow at the Universidad Autónoma. Taru, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. Hi, Taru.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you very much. Very interesting talk. I'm a Marie Curie Fellow at the Autonomous University of Madrid. And with the OpenEUDebate project, we are currently working on a book project on the EU politicization, in which the increased intertwining of European and national debates seems quite evident. So from this perspective, and certainly from the point of view of EU presence, which you were talking about, and how to maintain that dialogue between member states, citizens in the EU, and the EU Commission, it seems that it would be quite important for the Commission to continue this dialogue in national contexts in order to show engagement and interest towards national concerns and issues. So during the crisis, we have seen that the president of the European Commission has been quite active in different national media, unlike previous European Commission presidents. So my question is, will there be a change in the media engagement of the Commission across national media as a policy in the long term? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Media and national media have an extremely important role, of course, as mediators of indeed European issues to people in terms of also trust, of course, in information. Citizens are still looking very, very much to media, and by the way, to television and radio still quite a lot, because maybe they are becoming very, very big users of social media, but they don't necessarily trust them as much as some of the traditional media, at least. Those are some of the patterns that we see. And you are right in stressing that it's extremely important for politicians, for European politicians, for European leaders to be visible, for our president to be visible in national media. To, as I was explaining, that we took the cue from everything that our president was organizing in the crisis response to basically translate in message terms and in communication terms what she was doing. But if she had not engaged, as you are saying, also very strongly with national media, for example, we talked a little bit about Italy, where the crisis hit so hard. It was extremely important, I think, for the president to be present in Italian media to explain what the approach was, in addition to the many, many video messages that the president has been constantly fielding, because it has been extremely important to her to put out what the Commission was concretely doing to help member states face up to the crisis. So concretely, I can tell you that indeed, President von der Leyen has been very active in national media, publishing articles, and both in national and, by the way, also regional newspapers, because I think regional is absolutely key in addition to the national level. To reach people where they are in the media that they read or listen to. She gave a lot of interviews to radio and TV. I have listed here 200 publications of different articles and interviews. TV interviews, I have 48 interviews here. From all over Europe. I'm not sure that figure is correct, because I've seen more than this, but definitely the president was very keen to be present, and in addition to her own, let's say, messages, which were at some point in the crisis almost daily. The last time I checked, I think we were at 144 individual video messages that she has recorded. And some of them I've often myself seen when I late at night take a tour on some of the televisions, snippets from these video messages. And of course, on social media, they are there for everyone to click if they want to know what the Commission has done today. We use this very much because, of course, people increasingly look to social media for their information. So we need the full mix, I would say, of media use. But we also need, and that's one of the reasons that we need these both audiovisual and written media in the member states. We of course also need the journalists, because the journalists are the ones who will ask the questions where people really need the answers, because they know what people need better than anyone, I would say. So the national media, the independence of the media, the knowledge of the media of European affairs, the access to media, all of that is extremely important. We also try to nurture that very much by having a policy of transparency and this constant flow of information to journalists, of course, then they are critical and they ask legitimate questions. That's their job. Huh? We don't decide what they write, but they have access to the Commission every day in our daily briefing. And I'm happy to say that that has, even in the virtual mode, been a very privileged means of getting information, by the way, not only for journalists, because it's free for all to click in, as I'm sure you know, so that the spokespeople have been also virtually connected every day at midday to respond to the questions of the media. This, in addition to the very high availability indeed of the president, which I think is something that she pays very strong attention to.
Thank you. Can I just respond quickly?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you just said about journalists, I think that's a very good good point. That, I mean, we need mediators and we need experts of communication, experts of media, not just experts in academia or other kinds of experts, but we need people who mediate between citizens and the Commission. So I think that's a good approach. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Tadu. And this importance of mediators in general is something that we are very keen in this project, and we hope to demonstrate it in research. So as we move on, I'm now going to give the floor to our local, and now that we are in digital, it's much more fluid, but of course that's a recognition to our colleagues from the ULB, the Université Libre de Bruxelles, Maria Isabel Soldevila. She's a colleague at the ULB who is the first contact point for today's event organization, also member of the network. So Maria Isabel, the floor is yours, and thanks a lot for your contribution to putting this event together as well.
Thank you, Luis, and thank you for this great presentation. We have been doing research on this area for a while, and it's interesting to see that you have highlighted the listening dimension of the communication strategy and all the different channels that have been created to enforce this listening dimension of the strategy. Also, you have spoken a lot about analyzing sentiments and empathy and tailoring messages to the audience according to their needs and connecting them to the project. And we have seen this as a development in the communication strategy of the Commission in the last few years. But what I wonder now, it has been less evident as we try to study and analyze the strategy, is how concretely does this listening dimension, the feedback that you gain from citizens, feeds the definition or redefinition of political priorities. How does it work, and what the role of DG COMM is in bridging the gap between the two, between what the feedback is, what citizens tell through all of these different ways of engaging with the Commission, what they want, what they need, what they think the European Union should do for them, and how does that become an element of influence in the actual policymaking, and maybe see a little bit also how you make it possible for the two to join. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very interesting question. I think I tried to answer a few of these things already, because indeed it goes right to the heart of some of the criticism you sometimes hear, perhaps because the European Union doesn't really look like a national government, a national democracy. It's European democracy, nevertheless. Indeed, with of course, representation through elected governments in the council, through the democratically elected MEPs and the accountable European Commission, also of course elected by the Parliament, and there is actually a remarkable amount of feedback that is shaping policy making. I referred to some of it already. For example, many of these national consultations and European citizens dialogues in the past previous Commission mandate that actually led to first, as you will perhaps remember, the presentation of the strategic vision for the period ahead last spring. Then, of course, there was a process also in the European Council with the definition of strategic objectives, also very much inspired by what had been identified as priorities for citizens. You will see there's a large overlap in, for example, the reports from the different citizens consultations and these priorities. And then, of course, President von der Leyen established her guidelines that were indeed approved also, and that led to indeed the formation of the new European Commission on the basis of these guidelines that met the support of the democratically elected European parliamentarians. So there you have, let's say, at least the democracy side very much catered to. But of course, as I was saying, for the European Union, for the European Commission, and I'm sure for the other institutions, democracy is not just something that happens every 5 years. It's something that needs to be alive in the daily debate, and indeed also it needs to be reflected in a demonstration that the European citizens are listening to citizens and meeting their concerns. I mentioned some of the consultation processes that we in the European Commission use to make sure that both citizens and stakeholder views are heard before we actually come forward with initiatives. I referred to the Have Your Say portal that citizens and stakeholders can use when they want to give their views on policy initiatives that are put out for consultation. When we talk about the Conference on the Future of Europe, we will have to see how exactly the exercise will be framed once we have a joint declaration from the agreed between the institutions, because it's an interinstitutional project. But what I can say is that what we are trying to work with in DG Communication is to design, for example, a platform, a digital platform at the moment that indeed will allow the feedback from events under the conference, because again, we have to see exactly what the terms of reference will be for this exercise that will be politically defined. We have put out some ideas from the Commission side back in January, as you will remember. So once that is clear, we will make sure that the feedback is there and it's visible for everyone to see, and then we can also show every stage of the process very transparently from a communication point of view. And then, of course, as indeed also our president has made clear, beyond and above what is already on the table, if you like, in terms of plans and proposals, as I was saying, very much inspired already from let's say what we have heard from citizens in the past. Well then, indeed, I'm sure that she, along with the other institutions, will come back under the framework that will eventually be agreed for the conference, and indicate how the follow-up will take place. But that, is too early for me to say what the mechanism will be, because it simply hasn't been agreed yet, for good reasons, because fighting the crisis was every citizen's, I think, first priority for the last few months, and will be for some time yet.
If I may just follow up quickly, one of the challenges has been, and we've seen it on the feedback of your corporate campaigns, has been reaching out to those who are not natural European followers or Euro lovers in a way. So have you thought about specific ways of also including, or being able to include, of course, this is a difficult question, maybe not an easy answer, of course, to also create new mechanisms to reach out to those who are not inclined to come and give their opinion or go to the platforms that you have already mentioned before? Thank you.
I think we need to use a lot of creativity there to get to all the corners of Europe, as you're also saying is important. We have some tools at our disposal that we can use. For example, through the roughly 500 Europe Direct information centers across Europe that have a very important, I would say, finger on the local pulse and is able to tell us quite precisely what is the feeling in the local communities. This is a network. It's not part of the European Commission, but it's a network that we support and that very much is supporting information and communication about Europe. I think also regional and local representatives, why not municipalities and others who are also organized at the European level, have a role to play, in addition to, of course, our own presence in the capitals and the networks that indeed exist in all sectors of business, for example, of Europe, and in all areas of activity in Europe have a role to play. So there are many different levels of mobilization which are possible to indeed get out to new audiences. So undoubtedly, this will have to be part of the thinking when it comes to reaching new audiences and enabling people in all corners of Europe to have a larger say, if they wish so.
Thank you very much. We had two questions from, I'm not necessarily distinguish between academic and practitioners, but from two media outlets, Agenda Pública and Calea Europeana. Our colleague Mark from Agenda Pública has had a small problem today and cannot join us, but his question was about the narratives of solidarity, and that's related to a series of 10 podcasts that we organized recently in relation to the EU after coronavirus. That relates also to a question that was brought in the chat, and we may be able to come back to these narratives at the end. But I now wanted to give the floor to Dan Carbonaro from Calea Europeana, joining us from Bucharest. And I know we are going to move to more communication subjects. So Dan, the floor is all yours.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Mrs. Hansen. Thank you, Luis, for this opportunity. Greetings from Bucharest. For the moment, I cannot join the Brussels live as a physical person, but we use the digital opportunities to communicate each other. So congratulations, first of all, Mrs. Hansen, for your activity, your team activity, and your presentation. And as you finished your presentation initially talking about misinformation, I would like to ask you something about it, because each crisis was hitting Europe was treated as an opportunity, usually, to develop new tools for providing an increased European approach in solving European citizens' problems. And in the last years, we felt the pressure heavily put it by the propaganda and the tools of hybrid war. And my question for you is, as we know that we have some tools, EU East Stratcom Task Force, for instance, does the Commission intend to protect the public sphere using this expertise, this kind of expertise already, let's say, tested in combat? And which is, under your opinion, the major risk identified so far in terms of hybrid war in Europe? Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much for this very important question. Of course, indeed, as you also stressed, there are several actors in this at the institutional level in the European Union. You are right that it's absolutely something that has grown very rapidly since the beginning of the crisis, and it has continued to spread as we saw the coronavirus crisis play out. And indeed, it has been playing very much on people's fears in relation to this particular crisis and the increased use of social media. And it has, in the context of the coronavirus crisis, it has really even presented a real threat to public health, as well as indeed, and that's not new, those who have propagated disinformation have taken advantage of the situation to sometimes push political agendas. As far as the action that we have been taken, we have definitely rebutted also in this crisis many myths, a lot of misinformation, because there's misinformation and then there's disinformation, this deliberate malign attempt to manipulate opinion and information. But I mentioned everything that has been circulating about the health aspects of the disease, of course, or the disease itself, or it's the treatments or the vaccines. I referred to it already, as well as also, and there indeed some foreign actors have come in as well, when it comes to the perceived lack of EU response or perceived lack of solidarity. Our president was very conscious of this from an early moment, and asked us to have, as part of this website that she asked us to create, to communicate what Europe is doing to fight the coronavirus crisis. She also asked us to have a disinformation section there, so that we actually, in all languages and in a format that makes it very easy also to share these stories, setting the record straight, if you like, on social media. This is one part of the strategy. It is, of course, to provide the stories and the facts in a very accessible way, also when it comes to the crisis. But in a broader frame, when it comes to dealing with disinformation, it's also about informing and educating the public about disinformation itself, how it works as a phenomenon, and indeed the danger that it poses, in this case, both to public health and to democracy. This is something that this commission is also very concerned about. You will have heard our Vice President Jourova also, in addition to the President herself and other members of the college, be very strongly voicing their concern in this area. So communicating actually very actively and regularly about how you actually identify disinformation, and how a typical online user can protect her or himself from disinformation is also part of the response. So without having the time to go into all the details, a very multifaceted approach is needed, also involving working with platforms, as we do and we have done for some time now, such as Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and since this month also TikTok, on developing standards to maintain the online information environment clean from harmful misinformation and disinformation. And there we have our code of practice, which is actually the first of its kind, a self-regulatory effort in this area, which is definitely called upon to grow even more important and ambitious as we go along, and we will see to which extent it needs to be complemented with regulation. We also need to fund, and that's what we're doing. We're funding researchers and civil society organizations that are dedicated to studying also the phenomenon of disinformation and to finding solutions, and fact checking is also a very independent fact checking, of course. It's not something we do, but we support it. As well as developing new technologies. We will also be able to be helped by artificial intelligence in this respect, definitely. And therefore, and then also protecting elections and public information to do this. You referred to the EEAS, and it's true that the EEAS has played a truly crucial role in fighting disinformation as a foreign policy threat. You referred to that, and that has expanded to now including more teams that are focusing on different regions outside the EU where disinformation might originate. And you will find, in relation to the corona crisis, quite comprehensive information on where we are stepping up the action. And this includes also doing more on social media in the debate in member states. The 10th of June, when we published a document on how we intend to step up the action and learn the lessons from the coronavirus crisis when it comes to disinformation. So a detailed response, but by the end of the day, it's also about building trust in institutions, having a strong communications environment, and this support to independent media that I mentioned, in addition to, because it starts with ourselves. How do we actually explain things that we know to our friends and families, and how do we think about sharing social media posts that we see? This is something that all of us have to pay very much attention to. So checking your sources and thinking before sharing, I think is also the part of the reflex that everyone needs to embrace. So promoting that is very important as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, and thanks, Pia, for this response. We have 4 pending questions from the floor, and we have 9 minutes left. So I suggest that we collect now two and two questions. So I would like to ask first to Mr. Ander from the Foundation of European Progressive Studies, who sent us a question in advance. I don't know if Laszlo, you are still with us and you would like to ask your question. Okay, I think maybe Laszlo doesn't want to raise a question. Okay. Thanks a lot. Or maybe he had to leave us. We also have a question from Luca Giuliano. I don't know, Luca, are you still with us? And would you like to raise your question?
Hello.
Hello, Luca.
Thank you very much for the interesting presentation. So I'm a student at the Institute of European Studies, and also a trainee at Protagoras, which is a think tank in political and public communication. And we are currently doing a research on the communication strategy of the Commission on the Green Deal. And a large part of our work is to know how the Commission will have to adapt its communication on the Green Deal in the post-coronavirus crisis. And I would like to ask you a question in relation to this. So it is clear that the Green Deal should be at the center of the EU's recovery plan. But in terms of communication, how will it be possible to concretely articulate the Green Deal's commitments and the EU's economic recovery? And how can we keep the member states united on their Green Deal commitments? Thank you.
Thank you, Luca. Because we have 2 pending questions, should we collect the last 2 questions and then leave?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the second question was raised by Catherine Guizan. Catherine, are you still with us? It was a question on well, as narratives and concrete narratives, right? It was raised in the chat.
Yes, well, I don't have anything to add, but you know about langue de bois. Excuse me, I'm a professor at the University of Minnesota in the United States. Thank you very much. And one of my students was just asking me 2 days ago how you are going to work against disinformation. So you have got my answer, and I will transmit immediately this afternoon. But what strikes me so often is that, you know, we hear those general statements about the Green Deal or whatever policies, and we need stories. They can be very short, just a few examples. It's just a suggestion. I think it would speak to all of us so much more, whether we are a scholar, a student, a so-called citizen. And I am a Swiss Greek citizen and American as well.
And I think just to mention, because you put that in the chat, Katerina, right? It was the reference to the Romanian doctors coming to Italy as the type of stories that can work very well. So this narratives having concrete dimension was part of the question. Thank you. And last, Professor Gratius, also from the Universitat Autonoma. Susanne, are you still with us? You had a question about the German presidency and the solidarity narrative, solidarity fund. Would you like to read your question, Susanne?
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, we do. Hi,
okay,
Susanne.
thank you very much, Luis. I can't, you can't see me because it's no way to initiate the video, the webcam.
But we hear you very.
Okay,
we hear you very well.
For me, you don't see me, but you can hear me. Great. I just wanted to know a little bit more, looking to the future, since this is nearly the last question. Looking for the what will happen with the German presidency. I feel that it's like a kind of occasion to get things done. Do you think that this is true, or will it be rather an obstacle? Because we have Ursula von der Leyen and we have Chancellor Merkel, and they are working very, very closely together. So do you think that this new fund, Solidarity Fund, whatever you call it, will be approved? Will it be a success story that you can sell afterwards as a communication strategy? Because we have now several months, which will be very, very important for the European Union and future of the European Union and the citizens, no? This would be my question. There are others, but this is that's it.
Thanks a lot, Susanne. So I have the impression that we still have a lot of things in front of us for the last 5 minutes. But well, Pia, of course, that's up to you to choose how much to balance between the questions. Thanks a lot for your patience.
Well, many thanks for the extremely important and wide-ranging questions that have been asked before, and now with the last 3 questions as well. There's a lot of ground to cover. You will excuse me for just touching on the tip of the iceberg here, because there are so many interesting things to discuss. On the communication of the Green Deal, and I referred to it very, very succinctly in my introduction. I think what is important here is that it was already, I mean, one of the flagship projects of this mandate before the crisis. And if anything, the Green Deal has become even more decisive for bouncing forward after the crisis. It's not bouncing back, it's bouncing forward, because and you will see it reflected also in all the way that Next Generation EU, this instrument, has been geared to a recovery that will not only be, if it succeeds, a recovery, an economic recovery, but a green recovery and a digital recovery as well, building a much more resilient Europe. That's the vision. The vision. We are looking at this vision now. We have the instruments, if member states can agree, indeed, and of course the European Parliament is very important in this respect as well. Then we really have a vision of recovery, of Europe coming out stronger of this absolutely dramatic crisis that has hit very hard. You saw, some of you surely, the economic forecast that was put out yesterday for the recession that Europe will find itself in, or is finding itself in, and even if it doesn't, the crisis has hit everyone, but countries are surely going to be affected very differently, which is why it is so important to have this package, which is an expression, if it is agreed, of solidarity, but also of self-interest, because everyone can only get well out of this if we get well out of this together. I think that's one of the most important messages that we can pass. Now, I'm already getting a bit carried away from the Green Deal. Before I get into this next question, let me say a few more things about the Green Deal. I mentioned that we will be focusing on a quite broad target audience there. And we will, of course, now that it's the recovery prospect, which will be kind of the umbrella for every kind of initiative that we are taking. You saw also examples of this today, where Executive Vice President Timmermans and Commissioner Simpson were in the press room presenting green energy initiatives and a strategy for the future. That is part of the Green Deal, focusing specifically of the role of hydrogen. I mean, there you already have the embryo of maybe one of the stories that was part of the next question, namely, I mean, how do we make it concrete? How do we show success stories, for example, in the energy transition that we need to have a greener and more sustainable Europe that at the same time becomes a growth strategy for Europe? How do we show the actors behind this? How do we demonstrate the people, the businesses, and the regions that indeed are affected and can be part of this energy transition with European support? This is the kind of story I think we need to tell, with concrete examples involving people, businesses, and indeed results on the ground. So this would very much be the way that we would do this, showing also that this transition indeed with the Green Deal will create opportunities for families and communities, and help create jobs in the process. Because even if at the moment what we are seeing is let's say maybe a less dramatic than first expected impact on employment, that is also due to indeed all the support measures that have been put in place, including at the European level with the SURE instrument, which will start very soon, also having an important positive effect on employment. But we need to create new jobs in the future, also in the Green Deal, to get also the support and indeed the social sustainability of our initiatives. So showing that will be part of how we also will campaign about the Green Deal in a recovery perspective. And then I think, and that was already planned before the crisis, we also have to show in the campaigns that it's important for people to participate through change behavior. I mean, we've all seen how we all have changed our ways when it comes to recycling our waste and changing our behaviors in terms of our consumption habits, etc. All of that is also important to show, because then people feel also more that they are part of it. So I think this is something that also brings support. People are more convinced if they feel that they have a route to contribute, and indeed that they also can have their say, as we discussed previously, in terms of the choices that we are making to get to that very necessary and very widely owned and shared objective of climate neutrality that drive all these individual initiatives behind the Green Deal. So that's my reply, or the reply that I have time for on the Green Deal, and perhaps also the embryo of a reply about the stories, where I completely agree. We have to tell more stories from the citizens' perspective. We have to use also the empathy and the emotion that I was speaking about, also to make people feel that this is real. That this is not just words, that this is not just, as the professor was saying, langue de bois, because I can tell you with my long experience with journalists, they don't take it. Langue de bois doesn't work with journalists, and actually it doesn't work with citizens either. So I think that's definitely something we need to get away from. And I think to answer maybe the last question, that the recovery plan for Europe, what we need to show, it was about also, do we think that it will happen? Is it a chance to get things done? That's what I heard in the question, including through this very strong alliance that you have seen at display when we had, for example, the press conference where Chancellor Merkel presented the German presidency, and President von der Leyen also gave her input on the priorities and how we are going to work to get this necessary and vital deal for Europe's recovery. There's a strong belief that this will be done and that we can get this done. But of course, it is not done yet. It requires very hard negotiations, which are ongoing as we speak. And that this ambition of getting out of the crisis in a way that also will be sustainable for the next generation, and that we don't leave behind a Europe that the next generation cannot thrive in and prosper in. No, on the contrary, we have to bounce forward. We have to build a stronger Europe, a more resilient Europe for the next generation EU. And that's why this brand, we feel so strongly about it, because then the project has a purpose if we actually build a Europe for the next generation. So I think, and that's what we can do if we can follow, let's say, the ambition that is set out for the Green Deal, for the digital transformation. But it's not done yet, and it requires compromise, and it requires also a really bold ambition and solidarity between the European member states. But as I was saying, it's also in the self-interest of every member state, because there are good examples of this, and unfortunately they are also turning up in media more and more, even in the so-called frugal countries that have a tendency perhaps to fear that this is about, let's say, transferring money that they need themselves to others. No, it's actually about more than that. It's about also preserving something which is very precious to the whole of the European Union, including the single market, which is, let's say, a source of wealth and prosperity for everybody. So I think that we have to find stories that make that real and tangible to people, that they can see the connection between all these efforts, also financially, that every member state will be making by contributing to this effort. And of course, therefore, we have also had to be very innovative in designing an instrument, the Next Generation EU instrument, which will be leveraging investment in a financially sustainable way for the member states that are all very, very hard hit, some much harder than others, but everyone has had, of course, to pull a lot of financing out of their national treasuries to support businesses and jobs in their member states. So this innovative approach that combines the traditional multi-annual financial framework with an innovative source of investment for the future, sustainable and digital, or green and digital and resilient, I think is something that hopefully member states can soon agree on, and then all the concrete projects for people can start rolling out.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Pia. Thanks a lot, Director General Ahrenkilde Hansen, for not only for a very interesting talk, but also for keeping so much time for the discussions. I think one doesn't always have the occasion to grill a Director General of the Commission with so many questions about how the EU did during the crisis and what's coming up. So I'm sure everyone will join me in giving you a virtual applause. So thanks all participants for a very engaging discussion. I think we covered a lot of ground, and thanks to our colleagues from the Université Libre de Bruxelles, who are founding member of OpenEUDebate, for organizing such an interesting event, and also to people who have been watching remotely in Facebook. We hope all across Europe, and we have seen also in the United States. So we look forward to keeping up this kind of discussion. So come to our website and listen to our podcast if you want to stay in touch. And we look forward to seeing some of the things that we have discussed developed in the coming months, because I am sure a lot of new issues are coming up. So it was a privilege to be able to listen to that as they develop.
Thank you very much. It was a privilege to take your questions and comments. Very enriching discussion. Many thanks, and looking forward to continue the conversation and be in touch.
Thank you, and everyone stay safe, I hope.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.